and welcome to the Fire Emblem tier list, ranking the Fire Emblem games. This is yet again a wonderful tier list that I found on Tier Maker. It does not have the original versions of 1 or 2, of Gaiden, or of 3, which I haven't played any of the original versions, so that is fine for me, for my purpose today. But know that if they were here, they would have gone and have not played. So I have ordered them in pretty much the order, canonically, but we'll start off with Shadow Dragon. Shadow Dragon, I really do. I like it a lot. It was a fun way to experience the first game. I think it's probably better than the first game because the ability to reclass, because of a lot of the quality of life functions. Some of the characters are not great, but you get to see some of the really great characters, and you have like Wolf and Sedgar, you have Sheeta, you have Marth himself, of course, and Jagan can become a Wyvern Lord, like right off the bat. I think the reclassing, the way that it does it with limits in Shadow Dragon is actually really good. And although I don't think the story of Shadow Dragon is like the best out of all of them, I do think it's a really fun game to play still. I want to put it in A. Echoes? I like Echoes. Echoes is not my favorite. I think Echoes has a lot of problems when it comes to the actual like world. I think the exploring the dungeons is cool, even though it's not something that I found myself doing very often. Classing up in Echoes is interesting, and I do like the characters in Echoes. I think Alm and Celica are really cool. I like Clive, but the story didn't really grab me, and as much as I like the characters, I don't really like a lot of the combat in Echoes. I think that the lack of the weapon triangle without really any options to get around it is odd and just doesn't feel right. We're going to get back to that in like Three Houses, which also doesn't have the weapon triangle, but does it in a different way. So personally, I'm going to probably put Echoes in a B. I don't think it's a bad game by any stretch of the imagination. I'm just not a huge fan. FE4? Fight me. No, FE4 is like just really good. FE4 is extremely solid. I like the characters of FE4. I love the story of FE4. The only negative that I have is how big some of those maps are. And it means that your infantry units like Jamka or Ira are going to get held back quite a bit from it. But I've just recently beaten FE4 for the first time. I was very behind on that, and I just can't. I can't, in good conscience, give it less than a triple S. FE4 is just really good. If you haven't played it yet, you should. There's a really nice English translation. Download an emulator, give it a go. It's just a really, really solid game. I like it a lot. FE5 I haven't played. I've played like the first 2 chapters of FE5 and have not had time to go back to it because Three Houses came out. So I'm sorry, everybody. I really want to talk about how good FE5 is, but I don't know how good it is, so it's gonna go and haven't played. FE6. People might not like me for this one, because I have some big problems with FE6. I love the characters in FE6. I think a lot of the characters in FE6 are really good. Lena is one of my favorite characters in the whole series. I think her having to overcome, everything that happens with Hector and everything that happens with Roy, and trying to make sense of everything and trying to help Roy, even though she's not that strong, but having to become strong. I think she's really cool. I like Roy enough as a character. As a unit, he's hot garbage. And he's not the only one. There are a lot of units in 6 that are just bad. Like, you get Windy and you get Boars, and they're never going to be good. You can make them decent, but they're never going to be good. And they're not the only ones. There's a lot of characters in 6. And so a lot of characters get shoved to the wayside. And as much as I do enjoy the story of 6, I just don't like playing 6 that much. So I think I'm going to put 6 in a C. I did not go for a D. I figure most of the games are at least relatively, decent. So I'm going to go there. But it goes straight from C to no. And we'll get to no in a little while. FE7, it's not perfect. It's not perfect at all. It has a lot of issues when it comes to the story. I'm tempted to put it in a triple S because it's my favorite Fire Emblem. What was my favorite? We're going to get into that too. But I do really like FE7. I think if not for Lin mode, I might be able to go ahead and give it an SSS. But the tutorial in Lin mode is so bad, to the point where you just skip Lin mode on every subsequent playthrough. You just start at Elowood or Hector mode, and you just never play Lin mode again. And that kind of makes those chapters wasted when they could have been spent in the rest of the game, The tutorial is too much. It's too often that it grabs you by the hand and tells you, oh no, I've been hurt. I need to use a vulnerary, or like teaching you how to trade. It's like that's a mechanic I would have tried on my own anyway. It's an effective tutorial. It teaches you how to play Fire Emblem, but I don't like it at all. It's a tutorial that's really constricting once you've been through it once, and so you just skip Lin mode, and that's a huge waste of those 10 chapters. It's just a big shame to me. But other than that, I love Seven. I love Hector. I love Elowood. I love Renault. All those characters are great. Almost all those characters are great. Uh, and I wish that Lynn was the one, by the way. If you couldn't tell, Lynn was the one I was referencing when I said almost. I really like those characters, and I just wish that Lynn mode had been different when it comes to actually the way the game plays, But I still think S is a really good score. Sacred Stones is going to get a B as well. And if you love Sacred Stones, that's great. I'm glad you do. I love Sacred Stones, but Sacred Stones has some problems. The first is that it feels like they know you could grind, and so it feels like they kind of base some of the difficulty of the game off of that. Sacred Stones is not a tough game, but there are characters that aren't very good either. They've got bad bases, they don't have great growths, and like especially the trainee units, right? You need time to train them. So you can go to the Tower of Alni and you can train them up, and then they'll be great. But that's not the way that I prefer to play Fire Emblem. I prefer to play Fire Emblem trying to clear the maps as quickly as possible, just to be able to see if I can do it, to test myself, to put those characters in kind of a shaky position, to be able to see if I can pull it off. And again, if that's not the way you play Fire Emblem, if you play Fire Emblem just to make bad units good, Sacred Stones is great for you. And Sacred Stones has some of my favorite characters in the series. Innes and Cormag are two of my favorite characters in the entire series. But Sacred Stones is just, I would say, weaker than some of the other games. Not just in storytelling, but in some of the maps. I think some of those maps are rough in the way that they're designed. And when you beat the game, you unlock the creature campaign and get a bunch of other characters that are all fine. They do the job, It's just not... The creature campaign itself is not a lot of fun to me. And as much as I love, babying Ross a little bit while I'm trying to clear the maps and putting him in bad positions until he becomes a pirate and then I push him into Berserker, like, that's great. But I could also just replay 7 again and try to clear those maps. I could replay 9 again. And I guess that's the thing that really pulls me back from 8 is I could play other games and get the same thing I'm looking for better than I could in 8. And then you have the shakiness of the start of the story in 8. You have these two routes, and they are very different, but you still have to play through that tutorial section to get to the route split. And then once you're there, the two routes, yes, they're different, and yes, there are different characters that you can get on each route, but they eventually join back up again to the same route. And so you get 5 chapters, 6 chapters separated between the two, and then it's just, hey, here we go, we're back together again, let's go. I do really like the story of 8. I think the stuff with Leon is really cool. I think the stuff with Ephraim and Erica and the friendship that the three of them have, and for Mortis and the way that all comes out, the stuff with Joshua and his mom, that's all really cool. I do like playing Sacred Stone. I just would prefer to play some of the other games more, which is... Sacred Stone's still a great game. It was one of my favorite games for a very long time on my GBA. But it's a B rank for me, personally. I hope that I explained that well. I feel like this is the one that I'm the most torn on, because I do really like Sacred Stones. I just think they made some questionable decisions when it comes to the way they balance them. We go from that, though, to FE9, which I'm really thinking about putting in SSS. Fire Emblem 9 is great. I'm gonna put it there. I'm gonna go ahead and put it there. Triple S. I'm gonna do it. Triple S. I love everything about Path of Radiance. I love the story. I love the characters. I love Ike. I love the Grail Mercenaries. I think it has some of the best early chapters in all of Fire Emblem. I think those early chapters are still really solid. The characters as you get along the way, the stories that develop from there, I think they're really good. The supports are really fun. I love the Lagoos and the entire Lagoos Bayork dynamic and how things are balanced there. The branded, I think that's all really interesting. I think the world building of Tellius is really strong. Then the characters themselves are really good. The combat's fun. I just think Path of Radiance is like, when I think of Fire Emblem in my head, Path of Radiance is the one that I think of now. Because Path of Radiance is just a really, really good Fire Emblem. So, have to give it a triple S for me. The only real flaw I have in Path of Radiance is that final map, and even then they give you a unit that can tackle it if you can't handle it on your. I guess the other one would be the Black Knight fight, right? There's no checkpoint. So if Black Knight procs Luna twice, Ike's just dead, and you have to redo that map. And that map is kind of long, so that is a fair complaint. But I think just like FE4 and that the maps are really big, I don't really think that complaint's enough to pull it from a. Because at the same time that Black Knight could Luna you twice, you could Aether him twice. You know, if I can Elixir, Train Mist, you're good. It's not perfect, don't get me wrong, but it's definitely doable. Radiant Dawn, I really like it. I really like Radiant Dawn. I'm going to put it in A, though, and I know that's very questionable. I know a lot of people love Radiant Dawn. My biggest issue with Radiant Dawn, and the reason why it can't go to an S for me, is the Dawn Brigade. I think the Dawn Brigade chapters are really solid. But then by the time you get back to the Dawn Brigade, they're so underleveled. The game does not bring them up to your level. And so you're in these really tough encounters with units that really aren't that useful. Especially like we go back to my FE6 complaints. You have Meg or Laura. It's like those units are not going to be able to stand strong against all this stuff the Dawn Brigade's been thrown against, especially when you have to fight the Grail Mercenaries. It's like, that's not happening. You're mainly going to be relying on Sov and Volug and Nyla. You're mainly going to be relying on Jill and Zehark, unless you recruited them over to the Grail Mercenaries, in which case, whoops. And it's just a huge shame, because I think that's a really cool dynamic. I love the way the story flips between all these different characters and comes back together. Again, look at my complaints with Sacred Stones, right? Of the two different routes that then just join right back up again really quickly. Radiant Dawn doesn't do that. The characters are all over the place, and they slowly come together in the final act, which is also where we get to my other big problem, which is the tower. When you get to the tower in Radiant Dawn, you have so many units that you've used, some a lot, some a little, and you have like 10 slots to bring units. It is a huge shame, because you have these really, really good units, and then you have no slots. And to tie all that off, the final battle, it doesn't matter how good everybody else is, you have to rely on Ike. Ike has to kill Ashera, and that's a huge bummer to me. Because, like, hey, maybe I wanted to do a run that's just, like, Zehark and Soth, you know? Like, maybe I wanted to do that, where every time I have the option to use those characters, I only use those characters. You still gotta bring Ike, no matter what, to be able to kill Ashera, or she's just full heals. And I think that's a huge missed opportunity, so they can have that cutscene. Because you could just have that cutscene anyway, just have Ike run in, you know? But for those reasons, I'm gonna leave it at an A, as much as I really do like Radiant. It's one of my top 5, I think. It might be top 6, but it's really good. And again, for anybody who's like, man, this is my, like, trying to be as objective as possible looking at this list. My subjective list would be FE7, Path of Radiance, 3 Houses, most likely. Spoilers for when we talk about 3 Houses. I have not played New Mystery of the Emblem. It has not been translated, though I hear there are some people working on a translation patch. We're going to put Awakening in S. I do have some problems with Awakening. I absolutely do. But Awakening breathed new life into the franchise. Those characters are fun. The maps are not all great, but there are some really good maps in Awakening. The reclassing feature makes your characters too strong in places, but the extra difficulty levels balance with that. So you have to do some reclassing to be able to beat Lunatic Plus, which, you know, I think works out really well when they actually build the difficulty around it and expect you to be able to get skills. Because, let's be honest, if you get Gale Force on all your female characters, you're destroying Awakening on anything up to about Lunatic. Maybe Lunatic Plus as well. But I think Awakening's a really solid game. The plot is all over the place, which is where my big complaints come in. Some of the characters are kind of one note. That doesn't help. But Awakening is like 3 plots trying to take up the time of 1 plot. And so you're wrapping them up really quickly and moving forward. And if not for how well it plays, I probably would have put it in an A anyway. I'm still considering moving it down to an A, honestly, because of that plot. Because you start with the stuff with Valadar, and then you get into the stuff with Walhart, and then finally come back around for the stuff with Grima. I also think that some of the reveal is ruined because of that scene at the start of the game. We're gonna move it down to an A, honestly. I think the story really does clog it down in a bad way. As good as the game is, I think it definitely does. I'm really gonna make some people mad with these next three, because I'm putting all three Fates games in no, and we're gonna talk about why. I might put Conquest in a C. We're gonna talk about why. So Birthright. Fates as a whole is rough. The gameplay wise, it's not bad. Gameplay wise, it's pretty good. Reclassing's still there, and you get very overpowered really quickly. There's also characters that don't make a lot of sense, like Rinka is supposed to be this tough warrior, and her strength growth is like terrible. But at the same time, gameplay wise, it's not bad. I think there's a lot of really cool features. The problem gameplay wise, because there are some problems with gameplay, are that all of your royals are way better than everybody else. They get either specific weapons, or they have way better stats, or they have access to classes, and it makes them crazy good compared to everybody else. You still have the problem that Awakening had that I didn't even bring up in the Awakening section, which is the children characters are really powerful, and there's not really anything to balance that out, other than just not training their parents. And that overbalances the gameplay really quickly, where you are quite OP compared to everything else. I wish that wasn't the case, but gameplay-wise, it is solid. The problem comes in with the story, and Birthright, I think, has it worse than the rest, because Birthright, and Conquest has its problems too, but Birthright has Xander be completely backwards. Like, Xander's just stupid in Birthright. And to the point of, like, I'm gonna hurt my own family to protect my family. Like, he doesn't make any sense in Birthright. You have Garen is, like, cartoonishly evil, and nobody recognizes that he's evil. You have Takumi in Birthright is really stupid. And then you get to the scene with Flora, where a character is set on fire, and while they are burning to death, proceeds to tell you their life story and why they did the things they did, and nobody puts the fire out, and the next chapter they're just like, oh, I'm so sorry that character died. It's like, they pontificated for like 20 minutes while they burned to death. They weren't screaming, you could have put the fire, you could have pushed them in the river over there. There's snow all around us. Yeah, Birthright's for sure a no. I'm gonna go ahead and put Conquest in no too, because I remembered some stuff. From the Conquest side, Garen is even worse. Garen is so much worse on the Conquest side, because he's so evil and nobody recognizes it. Like, at all. It's such a huge problem for me. Then you have Ryoma. On the Conquest side, Ryoma's stupid. Ryoma wants revenge for his family. He will only wait 25 turns. After 25 turns, he will get his revenge. So after 25 turns, he starts moving, right? You can beat that map in like 4 turns. So it's such a weird requirement, and the idea that he's just sitting over there going, I will contain my rage. And then after 25 turns goes, I don't have to contain it anyway. It's so stupid. Revelations is a little bit better, but I'm still going to put it in a no, because you still got to put up with Corrin. And Corrin is so terrible. Everybody loves Corrin, and Corrin hasn't done anything to deserve that love. Takumi is treated like a bad guy when he doesn't trust Corrin. And it's like, nope, Corrin's a good guy. Corrin doesn't want anyone to die. It's like, oh, that person you didn't want us to kill just killed somebody important to us. Corrin doesn't want anybody to die. And that's not even getting into Lilith, man. We're going to stop that right there. They're in no. I've ranted enough already. This video is not going to be just about Fates the whole time. Let's talk about Warriors. Fire Emblem Warriors. I have not beaten Fire Emblem Warriors. Let me just preface that. But I think Fire Emblem Warriors is actually really cool. I think, despite it being full of Fates characters, that are very one-note. I didn't even bring that up during the Fate stuff. Compared to, like, Awakenings characters that, like, Gaius loves candy, and that's his whole character, there are some very one-note characters in Fates. Despite that, I think Warriors is a lot of fun to play. I think especially like the mounted units, it's really fun watching them spin as they attack, and we'll get into that again when we get into three houses. I almost said three heroes. Yeah, I think Violent Warriors is really good. I think I'm gonna put it in a high B. I will put it in an A. It's really solid. Story wise, it's not that great, but gameplay wise, it's really solid. Fire Emblem Heroes. Really tempted to put this in a no. I played it every day for like 8 months, maybe longer, maybe not, maybe like 10 months. It's a gotcha, right? You get to see your characters and you get to see them in alternate outfits and they look really cool and they have some interesting abilities, but it's still a gotcha and it's like flooded by power creep. Those early units are rough now compared to the rest. You're expected to have specific units on your teams, especially in arena. You have to have counters for specific characters. IS keeps giving new characters that are even better than the old ones instead of like balanced characters that just have different hits. Some of them are balanced, but a lot of them, like that legendary flying Azura, it was like, oh, okay, all right, I see. Yep, we're gonna have to contend with this now. So I think I'm gonna put Heroes in a C because there is some fun to be had there, but it's very gotcha. Now three houses. Where am I gonna put three houses? Right? I mentioned earlier that if this was just my favorites, then I would be ranking three houses in like my top three. It might even be my favorite, depending. I'm on playthrough 2. I'm almost done with playthrough 2. I absolutely adore Three Houses. I do have some problems with it, but we're gonna go ahead and put it in S. I want to put it in triple S. I really do. We're gonna put it in a high S. We're gonna let it sit there for now because it's not perfect. It does have some problems. The biggest one is deployment slots. You're stuck to 10 in most maps. And 10 characters is not bad. There are definitely maps that have less than that in the series. But even 12 characters would have made a big difference. Now, the game's scaled for you to have 10 characters. So it's even, it's fair. But I really wish I could have brought like 12. Especially because if you do like, if you recruit a lot of students like I did on my first Blue Lions run, I had like 19 units and only 10 slots. Like, okay, everybody else is just there, I guess. You can set them as adjutants, and that's really cool because they can still gain XP and skill level that way, but it's just not the same as having them on the field, you know? And other than that, I think my big issue is on a first playthrough at least, it takes a long time to do everything you need to do in the monastery, to get as much renown as you want to get, to be able to complete all the quests, to be able to get all your supports. There's a lot of supports. Some of them are great, some of them are not. However, because of the way New Game Plus is brought in, on subsequent playthroughs, it goes a lot faster, and you can clear through entire months in minutes, you know? It's crazy how much faster the game goes then. I think the maps are designed in a lot of ways to be able to try to beat them as quickly as you can. There is some really, really good map design in there, too. A lot of them are just big squares, right? But some maps are more interesting. Some maps are we're stuck in the middle and have to work our way out. Some maps are we're on the far left, and our objective is not in the middle of the map. It's actually on the far right, and there's two different paths we can go to get there. Some maps are, well, here's the Fog of War. There are elite enemies on this map and regular enemies on this map. We need to get to this one specific location. I think my favorite map is the map where you have to kill the enemies before the green units can kill them. Because, for story reasons, you have to be the one to take them out. And I think that's a really cool dynamic of trying to rush the enemy while fighting around your green units that can move through you because you're their allies and you can't rescue in this game. You can't just pick them up. It does not have the weapon triangle in the way that we're used to it, but it does have skills that allow you to take advantage of the weapon triangle, which I think that balances out really well. You can choose not to partake of it, but you can still have it if you want to have it. And it makes leveling up your characters and leveling up their skills mean even more because you are then taking advantage of the skill that you wouldn't have otherwise. I think Three Houses is really solid. I loved my Blue Lions playthrough. The story's so good. Dimitri may be one of my favorite lords now. We're probably going to do one of these for the lords. But I want to finish the rest of the playthrough, see where it lands. It may go up higher for me in the future. If it does, I'll post a comment. Let you guys know. But let me know where you would put some of these games. I know that these ranking videos are very divisive. They have some of the most dislikes of any on the channel. Because I know that people do not always agree, and that's fine. If you don't agree, I understand. Everybody has a right to their own opinion. But let me know in the comment section down below what you disagreed with. What game you would put higher, what game you would put lower. And until next time, I've been Trey. This has been the Full Spectrum. And remember to always enjoy the full spectrum that Fire Emblem to offer.